Stop everything. Seriously. Put the phone down for a second, because what we are about to walk through together might be the single most disturbing pattern ever caught on camera in modern boxing. And the craziest part is, it was hiding in plain sight for almost a decade before anybody thought to rewind the tape. Claressa Shields, the self-declared greatest woman to ever put on a pair of gloves, the two-time Olympic gold medalist, the undisputed champion, the woman who tells anybody with a working microphone that nobody on this planet can touch her. That same Claressa Shields may now be sitting at the center of the one scandal no champion ever comes back from. We are not talking about trash talk. We are not talking about a bad scorecard or a shady judge. We are talking about loaded gloves. We are talking about an opponent who walked into the ring with a normal head and walked out of it looking like something out of a horror movie. And we are talking about one single press conference, where Claressa Shields did something she had never done in her entire professional career. She refused to take her gloves off, long after the fight was over, long after the bell, long after there was any earthly reason for a pair of 16-ounce gloves to still be on her hands. And the moment she finally did take them off, the whole internet gasped at the exact same time. So stay right where you are, because by the end of this video you are going to understand exactly why the boxing world is holding its breath right now, and why some people are saying this could be the beginning of the end for one of the most decorated careers the sport has ever seen. Now, before we go one single inch further, let me be crystal clear about something, because I take this part seriously. Some of what we are covering tonight is alleged. Some of it is being presented by people online as fact. I am going to tell you which is which as we go. The fair use disclaimer is sitting right there in the description box where it always lives, and nothing in this video is me telling you what to conclude. My job is to lay every piece on the table. Your job is to look at the table. And baby, once every piece is on that table, you're going to understand why the questions being asked about Claressa Shields right now are not the kind that just blow over with a news cycle. These are career-defining questions. These are legacy-burning questions. And the wildest part? The answers might have been sitting in old fight footage this entire time, just waiting for somebody to press play. So let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to where this story actually starts, because it does not start with the fight everybody is talking about. It starts years earlier, with a habit so consistent, so automatic, so clockwork reliable that nobody ever thought twice about it. Until the one night Claressa Shields broke the pattern. Take her fight back in 2016 against Frank Cruz de Zern. Go watch the footage yourself, it's all still out there. The final bell rings, the fight is done, and what happens? The gloves come off. Right there. Immediately. No hesitation, no delay, no drama. Fight ends. Hands free. That's the routine. That's what boxers do, because those gloves are hot, they're heavy, they're soaked, and every fighter on earth wants them gone the second the job is finished. Then look at her next outing, March of 2017. Different opponent, different night, same exact ritual. The bell sounds, the action stops, and there go the gloves again, coming off right after the fight, like it's part of the choreography. Nobody blinked. Why would they? This is what normal looks like. June 2017. Another fight, another final bell, and once again those gloves are off her hands almost before the referee finishes separating everybody. At this point, it's not even a habit anymore. It's practically a law of physics. Claressa Shields fights, the bell rings, the gloves come off. Every single time. August 2017. Say it with me, because you already know what's coming. Gloves off. Right away. On the stage. In full view of every camera in the building. And then January 2018 rolls around, and it's the same movie for the 5th time running. Fight over, gloves off, immediately, like clockwork, like a metronome, like something so deeply ingrained in her routine that she probably couldn't tell you she was doing it. And then we get to June of 2018, and y'all, the streak is still alive. Another post-fight scene, another pair of gloves hitting the mat within moments of the final bell. 6 fights, 6 identical endings. A pattern so clean you could set your watch to it. And honestly, if that's where the story stopped, there would be no story. A fighter who takes her gloves off quickly is not news. That's the opposite of news. But here's where it turns. Because the reason people went digging through all of this old footage in the first place is what happened in her most recent fight against Kaye Scott. And the reason that fight detonated the internet is not just what Claressa Shields did differently. It's what Kaye Scott's face looked like when it was over. See, when you go back through all those earlier fights, and you look at the women standing across from her at the end of the night, you notice something that feels almost impossible once you see it. None of them, and I mean none of them, walked out of that ring with the kind of damage we all witnessed on Kaye Scott. Watch the old post-fight footage closely. You'll see some redness here and there. You'll see normal bruising, the standard souvenirs of a professional boxing match, the kind of marks every fighter expects to wear home. What you will not see is a human head covered in massive, raised, swollen knots. You will not see lumps the size of eggs erupting across somebody's skull. That simply does not exist in the earlier footage. Not in 2016. Not in 2017. Not in 2018. Fight after fight after fight. Her opponents looked like they'd been in a tough boxing match, because they had been. And then there's Kaye Scott. Because according to people who were watching closely, and by now, millions of people have watched closely, almost immediately after that fight got going, a huge knot was already developing on that woman's head. Early. Shockingly early. The kind of swelling that usually takes rounds of sustained punishment to produce was showing up like it had been fast-forwarded. And by the time the night was over, y'all, the images that came out of that ring had people genuinely disturbed. One enormous knot on her head. And then another. And then more. Bumps stacked on bumps. Swelling on top of swelling. The kind of damage that made casual viewers gasp and made seasoned boxing people go very, very quiet. Now listen to me carefully on this next part, because precision matters here. I was not in that arena. I did not see anybody place anything inside anyone's gloves, and I did not see anybody remove anything either. I am not going to sit here and tell you I witnessed something I didn't witness. But I can tell you what the entire internet started asking within hours of that footage spreading, and the question was simple and terrifying. Was something inside those gloves? Was Claressa Shields fighting with loaded gloves? And before anybody runs to the comments to correct my vocabulary, yes, I know. If loaded isn't the technical term the boxing world uses for whatever this allegedly was, somebody down below will educate all of us on the proper terminology, and I welcome that. I'm using the word everybody else is using, because that's the word flying across every platform right now. Loaded. And once that word attached itself to the name Claressa Shields, it did not let go. But the knots on Kaye Scott's head are actually only half of this story. Maybe less than half. Because the second half is the part that turned a disturbing rumor into a full-blown 5-alarm fire, and the second half is about what Claressa Shields did, or more precisely, what she refused to do after the fight was over. Remember the pattern we just walked through. 6 consecutive fights. 6 final bells. 6 pairs of gloves coming off immediately, automatically, right there in front of everybody, every single time. That was the routine. That was who she was in the ring's afterglow. This time she held onto those gloves like they were welded to her wrists. The fight ends. The result gets red. And the gloves stay on. She leaves the ring area, gloves on. She makes her way toward the press conference, gloves on. She walks into the room, sits down at the table in front of all the microphones and all the cameras, and y'all, she is still wearing both of those enormous fight gloves, long after the actual fight has ended. And if you think that's a small detail, let me paint you the rest of the picture, because it gets stranger. Everybody else at that press conference table looks like a person who just finished a sporting event. Comfortable, relaxed, hands-free, doing normal human things with their normal human hands. And then there's Claressa Shields, sitting among them with 2 giant gloves still strapped on. And the contrast is so jarring that people in the room started visibly reacting to it. You can see the looks developing around the table. That slow turn of the head. That quiet glance that says, without a single word being spoken, is she serious right now? Look at her. Everybody else took their gloves off ages ago. Everybody else is sitting there like a regular person. And there she sits, gloved up, in a press conference, for a fight that is already in the record books. And then comes the detail that sent the internet fully over the edge. At one point during all of this, a little girl tried to help her get some water to her mouth. A child, y'all. A sweet, innocent moment. And instead of slipping the gloves off for 2 seconds so she could take a drink like any human being would, Claressa Shields kept them on. Kept them on so firmly that this little girl had to navigate the water up to her face and work around those oversized gloves, because the woman who had taken her gloves off immediately after 6 straight fights would not take them off to accept a drink of water from a child. Let that one sit with you for a second. Sit with it. Because whatever explanation you reach for, it has to explain that. It has to explain why a fighter with a decade-long streak of instant glove removal suddenly could not be separated from her equipment for love, water, or a little girl standing right there trying to help her. And then, finally, toward the very end of that press conference, after what felt like an eternity of speculation building in real time, the gloves came off. And y'all, when they came off, the room changed. Because once those gloves were off, everybody could finally see what had been hidden underneath them all that time. And what was underneath them was a pair of hands covered in bumps. Swollen. Knotted up. Bumps galore, if we're being honest about what the footage shows. And I genuinely struggled with what to even call her at that point, because the internet had already made up its mind about a nickname, and Lord help me, the one that stuck was Claressa Bumpy. I'm just telling you what's out there. That's the name the timeline chose, And once the timeline chooses a name, it never unchooses it. So now the questions multiply. Why did the gloves stay on? Why did they come off so late? And what exactly was going on with her hands underneath them? Well, according to what happened next, Claressa Shields had an answer ready. She just didn't deliver it until she was somewhere a lot more private. Because here's the sequence, y'all, and the sequence is everything in this story. Press conference finally ends. The gloves are off at last. And Claressa Shields, being Claressa Shields, keeps the show rolling on her way out, still talking, still giving the cameras something to carry home. Because if there is one thing this woman has always understood, it's how to keep every eye in the room on her. She makes her way back toward the locker room, and it's there, away from the podium, away from the hot lights, that the explanation finally arrives. Her finger was injured. That's what she said. According to her, the reason those gloves stayed on her hands for all that time, through the exit from the ring, through the walk, through the entire press conference, through a little girl trying to help her drink water, was a finger injury. And not a fresh one, either. Not something that happened during the fight, in the heat of battle, throwing those punches. No. According to her, that finger had been hurt days earlier. Days. Before the fight ever happened. Now, on the surface, that sounds like it closes the loop. Injured fighter protects injured hand. Gloves stay on. Mystery solved. Everybody go home. But y'all, the second that explanation hit the timeline tore it to pieces. And honestly, once you hear why, it's very hard to unhear it. Problem number one. Nobody had ever heard about this finger. Not once. Not before the fight. Not during fight week. Not in any interview. Not in any post. Not anywhere. And this matters more than people realize, because Claressa Shields has never in her life been shy about an injury. This is the same woman who had the whole world discussing her knee situation. She talked about that openly, publicly, repeatedly. When something is wrong with her body, historically, she tells people. She lets everybody know exactly what's going on, how she feels, what she's fighting through. That's her pattern. That's as consistent as the gloves coming off. So for a fighter who broadcasts every bruise and every ache to suddenly go completely silent about a finger injury that was supposedly serious enough to justify keeping fight gloves on through an entire press conference, that silence is loud, y'all. That silence is screaming. Problem number two, the timing of the reveal. The finger injury did not enter the conversation when it allegedly happened. It didn't enter the conversation before the fight. It entered the conversation at the precise moment people started asking why she wouldn't take her gloves off. It arrived exactly when an explanation was needed. And people online noticed that immediately, because people online notice everything. The question they started asking was brutally simple. If that finger was hurt days before the fight, where was that information days before the fight? And if it wasn't worth mentioning then, why was it the very first thing worth mentioning now? And then comes problem number three, and this is the one that turned the temperature all the way up, because this is where the two halves of the story snap together like magnets. Think about what she was being accused of. People were asking whether something was inside those gloves. And think about what happens, physically, if a fighter spins round after round throwing full power punches with something hard inside the glove that isn't supposed to be there. That force doesn't just go one direction, y'all. It comes back through the hand, through the knuckles, through the fingers. An illegal object inside a glove doesn't just do damage to the person getting hit. It can absolutely wreck the hand of the person doing the hitting. So when Claressa Shields surfaced after all of this with a finger injury and hands full of bumps, the internet did the math out loud. And the math sounded like this. An injured finger would explain why she kept the gloves on. But loaded gloves would also explain the injured finger. The same single fact fits two completely opposite stories, and only one of those stories is innocent. Now, I want to be very clear here, the way I was clear at the top. This is a massive allegation. Loaded gloves is not some petty scandal, not some gossip of the week situation. In boxing, tampering with gloves is one of the darkest sins the sport even has a name for. Careers have been incinerated over it. Legacies have been permanently erased over it. And nobody, not me, not the loudest account on the timeline, is sitting here with proof in hand tonight. What we have is a pattern break, a set of injuries, an explanation that arrived late, and a mountain of questions. What we have is smoke. The question everybody is wrestling with is whether there's a fire producing it. And to really understand why people believe there might be, you have to understand the pressure Claressa Shields was carrying into that ring, because that pressure is its own character in this story. For years, y'all, the one criticism that has followed her everywhere, the one crack in the armor that her critics swing at over and over again, is the knockout conversation. She wins. She dominates. She collects belts like they're going out of style. But the stoppages, the clean, devastating, highlight reel knockouts that stamp a fighter as truly feared, the internet has been relentless about that gap. Every single fight week, the same drumbeat. She can't put anybody away. If an opponent stumbles against the ropes, if something fluky happens, the critics refuse to count it. Not a real knockout, they say. Where's the power, they say. If you're really the greatest, prove it the way the greats prove it. And Claressa Shields hears every word of that. You know she does, because nobody in combat sports lives on social media the way she does. She is plugged in, logged on, and responding. That noise is not background static to her. It's personal. And the message the noise was sending, louder and louder with every decision win, boiled down to 3 brutal words. Put somebody down. Then came the Kaye Scott fight. And here's where I have to be honest about my own experience watching it, because I think a lot of people had the same experience and are only now reinterpreting it. While that fight was happening, I genuinely thought I was watching Claressa Shields take it easy on her opponent. That's what it looked like in the moment. Measured, controlled, almost like she was carrying Kaye Scott, letting the fight breathe, babying her a little. But now that everything else has come out, the knots, the gloves, the finger, the pattern break, people are going back and watching that fight with completely different eyes, and they're asking a chilling question. What if she wasn't taking it easy at all? What if what we were actually watching was a fighter trying with everything she had to put her opponent away, and an opponent who simply refused to go? Because credit where it's due, Kaye Scott refused. Whatever was happening to her in there, whatever was landing on her, that woman made a decision that she was not going out like that. She was not getting dragged across that ring. She stayed on her feet as much as her body would allow. She fought through things that had the crowd wincing, and she denied Claressa Shields the clean, cinematic finish that the pressure campaign demanded. And yet somehow, when the official result was read, it went into the books as a knockout for Claressa anyway, a result that a huge chunk of the audience has never treated like a real stoppage because of everything that surrounds it. And the comparisons started immediately, because they always do. The question people keep throwing at her is the same question they've thrown for years, just sharper now. If you're going to tell the world you're the greatest, why don't your fights end the way the greats' fights ended? Where are the nights where the other person simply cannot continue? And look, I already know the response, because it shows up in every comment section every time this comes up. She's not Mike Tyson. Fine. Fair. Nobody is Mike Tyson. But y'all, she's the one who talks like she exists on that altitude. She carries herself like the air up there belongs to her. She tells anybody who will listen that she's the greatest to ever do it, that nobody can touch her, that the conversation begins and ends with her name. And when you spend years building that pedestal with your own mouth, you don't get to act surprised when the world expects you to perform like you belong on it. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. Which brings us to the part of this story that honestly might be the darkest, if even a fraction of it is true. And y'all, we have to talk about the irony sitting at the very center of this storm, because it's almost too perfect to be believed. This is a woman who built her entire public identity on the word greatest. Not one of the greatest. Not a great of her era. The greatest, capital G, self-crowned, defended in every interview, stamped on every walkout, argued into existence on every platform where anybody dared suggest otherwise. Claressa Shields has spent years demanding that the world place her name at the very top of the mountain, and she has fought people online, in interviews, and everywhere else to keep it there. But here's the brutal physics of that strategy. When you insist on living at the highest altitude, you also live where the oxygen is thinnest and the fall is longest. Every champion who ever claimed GOAT status discovered the same truth eventually. The crown isn't just heavy, it's a target. The same confidence that makes you magnetic in victory makes you combustible in controversy, because the public will forgive arrogance in a winner far faster than it will forgive questions in a queen. And right now, the questions are arriving faster than the answers. And the gap between the two is where careers get rewritten. That's why people with long memories keep saying this moment feels different from every other controversy she's ever navigated. She survived feuds, survived beefs, survived internet pylons before, and she usually survives them by doing what she does best, talking louder than the noise. But this noise doesn't work like that noise. You can't out-tweet a question about what was inside your gloves. You can't ratio your way past footage of yourself sitting at a press conference wearing equipment everyone else had already taken off. The skills that made her untouchable in every previous storm are precisely the skills that don't work in this one, and the whole world can feel her realizing it in real time. And to understand why this accusation hits the boxing world like a lightning strike instead of a raindrop, you have to know something about the history here, because this sport has been down this road before, and every single time, the road ended in ashes. Boxing people still talk in hushed voices about the night Resto's gloves were found to have been tampered with back in the 80s, a scandal that left opponent Billy Collins with damage that haunted the rest of his life, and sent Resto to prison. Decades later, Antonio Margarito's hand wraps were seized before his fight with Shane Mosley after officials found a hardened substance inside them. And even though he was stopped before the fight, the shadow of that discovery followed every win he had ever earned, including his brutal victory over Miguel Cotto, a win people have questioned ever since. That's what this accusation does, y'all. It doesn't just attach to one night. It reaches into the past and starts pulling threads on every triumph that came before it. The sport remembers. The sport never forgets. And the fact that the name Claressa Shields is now being mentioned anywhere near that lineage, even as an allegation, even as speculation, even as internet theory, tells you exactly how serious the temperature of this moment really is. Meanwhile, the amateur detective work happening online right now is unlike anything I've seen around a boxing story. Timelines are being built. Frame-by-frame breakdowns of the press conference are circulating with hundreds of thousands of views. People freezing the exact moment the gloves finally came off, circling her hands in red like it's evidence night on a true crime show. Side-by-side comparisons of Kaye Scott's face against every previous opponent are everywhere. Old interviews are being resurfaced and recaptioned. Body language experts, self-appointed, but still, are analyzing how she sat at that table, how she held her arms, how she reacted when the water came near her gloves. And the boxing insiders, the trainers and former fighters who usually stay diplomatically quiet when controversy touches a champion of her stature, are being watched to see who comments and who stays silent. Because in this sport, silence reads as loudly as speech. Every single day that passes without a clear, detailed, verifiable explanation, the speculation hardens a little more into something that starts to feel like consensus. And that is the most dangerous phase of any scandal. The phase where the questions stop being questions in the public's mind and start being answers waiting for paperwork. Because once the fight was over and the damage was done, the cameras caught something else, something that, at the time, looked like sportsmanship, and that now, depending on what you believe, looks like something else entirely. After everything that had just happened in that ring, after Kaye Scott had absorbed whatever she absorbed, there was Claressa Shields, right up in that woman's face afterward, smiling, laughing, bringing her belts around, draping them into the moment, congratulating her opponent, telling her things like she hopes everything works out for her. Warm, gracious. The picture of a champion being generous in victory. At the time, people read that as class. Some people still do. But if any part of these allegations ever turns out to be true, then that warmth doesn't read as class anymore. It reads as something much colder. It reads as a victor admiring her own work. And y'all, I don't even want to type that sentence, let alone say it out loud. But it's the sentence the entire internet is already saying, so it might as well live in this video too. And here's the part nobody seems to be sitting with long enough. Somewhere in the middle of this firestorm is Kaye Scott herself. A real person. A real fighter who climbed into that ring trusting the sport to protect her, trusting the commissions, the inspectors, the wraps, the gloves, the whole sacred ritual that is supposed to guarantee that the only thing inside the other woman's hands is the other woman's hands. That woman went home with a head full of knots, and now she gets to watch millions of strangers debate whether what happened to her was even legal. Imagine being the evidence. Imagine scrolling your phone and seeing freeze frames of your own swollen face passed around like exhibits in a trial you never asked to testify in. Whatever the truth turns out to be, she deserves it. Every fighter who ever laces them up deserves it. That's not commentary, y'all. That's the foundation the sport is built on. And when that foundation cracks, everything standing on top of it starts to wobble. Because understand something. This was never supposed to be possible. That's the part that has the old school boxing people the most rattled. There is a whole chain of custody built around those gloves. They get inspected. They get signed off on. Officials watch the wrapping of the hands, watch the gloves go on, mark them, tape them, initial them. The entire system exists specifically because of men like Resto and Antonio Margarito, specifically because the sport swore to itself, over and over, never again. So if, and it is still an if, underline it, highlight it, tattoo it on your forehead. If anything was ever wrong inside those gloves, then we are not just talking about one fighter and one bad night. We are talking about a failure with a body count of checkpoints. Who inspected? Who signed? Who watched? Who looked away? The questions don't stop at Claressa Shields' locker room door, y'all. They run all the way down the hallway, past every official who was supposed to be the firewall between a fair fight and a felony. And that is exactly why the silence from the institutions has been so deafening. Because notice what hasn't happened. No commission has stood at a podium. No sanctioning body has called a press conference of its own. No promoter has demanded the gloves be pulled from evidence and examined in front of cameras. Everybody in a blazer is very, very quiet right now, And people are reading that quiet two completely different ways. Half the internet says the silence means there's nothing to find, that adults in the room know this is just online hysteria, and they're refusing to dignify it. The other half says silence is what institutions do when they don't yet know what they're going to find, when the lawyers are still in the room and the liability maps are still being drawn on whiteboards nobody outside that building will ever see. I can't tell you which half is right, but I can tell you that in boxing, the truth has a way of leaking, and the longer the official quiet stretches, the more pressure builds behind it. Meanwhile, Claressa Shields is doing what Claressa Shields has always done. She's fighting back the only way she knows how, in public, with her chest out. The posts are flying. The denials are loud. She is calling the accusations exactly what you'd expect her to call them. Hate, jealousy, the price of greatness, the sound of people who have been waiting years for a crack to pry at. And look, some of that is probably true. Let's be fair in both directions tonight, because fairness is the only thing separating this video from a hit piece. There genuinely are people who have been waiting for her downfall since the day she first called herself the greatest, and those people would believe any rumor about her, proof or no proof. Every queen has a faction preying on her collapse. That's real. But here's the thing about that defense, and her supporters need to hear this part too. The existence of haters doesn't manufacture footage. Resentment doesn't strap 16-ounce gloves onto a woman's hands at a press conference. Jealousy doesn't raise knots on an opponent's skull in the opening rounds. The things at the center of this story are not opinions, they're events, things that happened on camera, in front of witnesses, in full HD. The interpretation is debatable. The events are not. And that distinction is why this scandal has legs that her previous controversies never had. You're not arguing with somebody's feelings about her personality. You're arguing with tape. And tape, y'all, is undefeated. Tape doesn't get tired. Tape doesn't get ratioed. And tape never, ever forgets. So where does this go from here? That's the question hanging over everything now. And honestly, the paths are pretty clear. Path 1. Somebody official finally does the thing. The gloves get examined, the footage gets reviewed by people with actual authority, and the sport gives the public a verdict backed by evidence instead of vibes. If that examination comes back clean, then Claressa Shields walks out of this with the one thing she has always craved and never quite gotten from her critics. A vindication that shuts mouths permanently. Imagine it. The woman who says she's untouchable, tested by the ugliest accusation boxing has, and cleared in the light of day. That would be a coronation. But path 2 is the one that should scare everybody who loves this sport. Path 2 is the slow one. No examination, no statement, no resolution, just a story that never technically dies, a question mark that follows her into every arena, every negotiation, every legacy debate for the rest of her life. Because that's the cruel mathematics of an accusation like this. It doesn't need to be proven to do its damage. It only needs to be possible. And every time somebody new stumbles onto that press conference footage, every time another algorithm serves up that little girl with the water bottle, the whole fire starts over again with fresh oxygen. And for the people asking what they should believe right now, while the smoke is still this thick, you've sat with me this long. So here's a straight answer. I believe the pattern break is real because it's on tape. I believe the knots on Kaye Scott's head are real because we've all seen them. I believe the finger injury explanation arrived at a very convenient hour, and timing like that deserves scrutiny, not blind faith. And I also believe, hold both of these at once, because adults can do that. That suspicion is not conviction, and Claressa Shields is entitled to the same presumption every one of us would demand if the internet ever pointed its telescope at us. The tape raises questions. Only evidence gets to answer them. Until that evidence exists, everything else is noise, loud, disturbing noise, but noise all the same. So now I turn it over to you, because this conversation doesn't end when this video does. Honestly, that's where it starts. Get in the comments and tell me where you land. Did the gloves staying on mean something? Or did an injured fighter just protect an injured hand? Did the internet crack a scandal? Or did it build one out of a pattern break and a pressure campaign against a woman who dares to call herself the greatest? And if you're a fighter, a trainer, a cut man, anybody who's actually lived inside that rapping ritual, I especially want to hear from you, because your eyes see things in that footage the rest of us can't. Drop it all below. The good, the bad, the technical terminology corrections, bring it all. And listen, whether you think she's guilty, innocent, or somewhere in the fog in between, one thing is undeniable. This story doesn't stay contained. It spreads, it mutates, and the next chapter could drop at any moment. A commission statement, a leaked examination, a corner man deciding to talk. When it does, you're going to want to already be here. So hit that subscribe button, Tap the bell so you don't miss the follow-up the second it goes live. And drop a like if this video gave you something real to think about. Share it with the boxing person in your life. The one who still says women's boxing doesn't have drama, and watch their face. We came in tonight with one question. What was inside those gloves? And we walked through every piece on the table. 6 straight fights of instant glove removal. One night where the gloves stayed welded on. An opponent covered in knots. Hands covered in bumps. A finger injury nobody heard about until it was needed. And a sport with a graveyard full of careers that ended exactly this way. The pieces are all still lying there, y'all. Nobody has picked them up yet. Nobody with a badge and a subpoena has touched the table. Until they do, this story stays exactly what it is, the loudest unanswered question in boxing. The bell has rung on this one, but the count is still going. And baby, something tells me we haven't heard 10 yet. I'll see you in the next one.